This is the television part of it where we wait for somebody to say. A very good morning and welcome to day one of what will be an amazing and incredible Co-Create Design Festival. This is a culmination of what has been a series of conversations around the circular economy and circularity in South Africa. Today, we will spend some time introducing you to the concept once again, in case you're joining us for the first time. And then the second half of the morning will be spent on looking at waste and waste management in South Africa and how circularity could actually be beneficial should we decide to adopt it in a South African context. My name is Afrika and we are broadcasting live from D-School Africa, which is a wonderful facility celebrating a year on the campus of the University of Cape Town. And in a moment, we'll introduce you to the school and why it exists, and more importantly, how you can gain access to it. This series of conversation, of course, has been going on now for a number of years, and today we're going to be shining the spotlight on circularity, as I said. We have to say thank you very much to the Mission Network of the Kingdom of the Netherlands for making the Co-Create Design Festival possible this year, as well as City of Cape Town, GreenCape, the African Circular Economy Network, and Circular South Africa. They've been important partners in helping conceptualize some of the thinking and what we need to reflect on. But let me pause there for a second and ask you to spare a thought for the people of Cape Town, particularly those in the Cape Flats who are stuck in traffic at the moment because of the strike, or the stay away, as they call it, that has been called by the taxi associations. I certainly wish that government and taxi associations will get together and come to a solution before any more mayhem, any more destruction, and sadly, any more death is reported. We also need to spare a thought for communities in Gauteng who, because of illegal mining, are really living in terror. We have been focusing a lot of attention on Riverlee on the south of Johannesburg, and there seems to be not a lack of solutions, because I'm sure there are, but let's start implementing solutions that are going to be practical. And I highlight those two things because, in part, the economy, the structure of the economy, and how we play it out on a daily basis is giving rise to these challenges. And we really need to start looking for solutions that will start giving us a way of addressing those concerns. And the circular economy could very well be that option, or not. We're going to be spending the next 2 days exploring those. And of course, with me on stage at the moment is Helene Rekers, who's the Consul General for the Kingdom of the Netherlands here in Cape Town, Erika Alp, who's the Group CEO for the Craft and Design Institute, and from the D-School Africa, Peter Matthews, who's the Head of Shared Services. Helene, I'll start with you. Firstly, congratulations on your victory against Banyana Banyana on Sunday night. Our girls did very well, and we certainly wish the Netherlands the best as they go. They face Spain next, or something ridiculous like that. We'll be rooting for them, don't worry. There's no green with envy moment here at all. What are you expecting from the festival this year?
Thank you very much, Afrika, and a warm welcome to all of you. And many thanks to the University of Cape Town for being in this magnificent building, and to CDI for helping us to be here. Just a word on Banyana Banyana. In the Dutch press, they were really congratulated for the magnificent play. Yes, we had a difficult time beating the ladies, the South African ladies. So all power to them. Yes, thank you for inviting me to reflect a little bit upon what the expectations are. We have the festival now. We already had 2 exchanges on circular economy thus far, and I am really happy and proud that this topic is being discussed in this year, and I hope that we can continue the talk on this topic. Excuse me. Because it is a concept that is actually already being practiced in many places, and I hope some of the speakers will be able in the next 2 days to tell how things are being done in practice, because I think a lot can be, the thought process about it has developed very, very much in South Africa, but the idea of how do you actually do it, and how can we make sure that it benefits not only the environment, and as you were saying, all of us around, but also be beneficial at the end of the day in your pocket. So I hope that these 2 days will give us some clues, some ideas, some thoughts about how we can make it practical.
Absolutely. Erica, I suppose the important question then begs, what do we need to be thinking about over the next 2 days?
So I think we need to be thinking about the problem or the issue from a whole lot of different perspectives. What can government do? What can business do? What can I as a business owner do? What can civil society do? And what can I do? Because I think that the only way we get to being practical and finding practical solutions is if we put ourselves in those different positions and think really hard, what would it take to change the environment or have some kind of systemic impact?
Because, Helene, it is important for us to walk away with going, how do we make whatever ideas we come to over today and tomorrow practical? Because as Erica says, how can my business, my network, my sphere of influence actually adopt circularity? And I'll only start adopting it if I know, one, I can benefit, and hopefully then people around me or in that network can benefit as well.
Yes, that's exactly correct what Erica is saying. You have to not only visualize it from a theoretical standpoint, but you have to start to experience it, I think. And as a matter of fact, what is very interesting, you said today we talk about waste management, tomorrow about tourism and fashion. But the example you will hear about tomorrow is a combination of a textile company with a waste management company. So the combination of those two different sectors can also help to think further on the issue of circularity.
Let me ask this question, and appreciate that it's above both your pay grades, because you're not sitting in the National Assembly of the Republic of South Africa. You're not making decisions around approaches to economy and the, I suppose, outlook that we're going to have. Is it possible to implement and institute aspects of circular economy, even if the macroeconomic policy is different from the principles we'll be discussing over the next 2 days?
That's a very good question. I think I would tend to say yes, but I do realize, to be realistic, that the policy environment also needs to help. Yes. If, for instance, if you want to be able to use waste, or if you want to be able to use in the fashion second-hand textile, the policy environment needs to allow that these types of products are being used for that particular purpose. So it does go hand in hand, and what Erica is saying, everybody does need to work together on that.
I mean, I think to add that I think we sometimes don't feel like it, but actually we can also influence policy. And I was thinking this morning about, if we think about, well, somebody, you were asking if you can smoke in the building. And if you think about the sort of approach to plastic bags in retail stores or whatever, those are things that have come around from civic action and has actually changed behavior and had an impact on the environment. So I think that we need to, obviously it's harder, I think, to impact policy, but I think we've got to think about both. If we're just thinking about our own actions, sure, we can impact in our immediate environment, but we also need to be thinking as activists, what can we do to change the broader environment?
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to those conversations, and I'll be introducing our delegates, of course, to those panel members in a moment.
I've got one other question that I want to ask.
Go ahead.
I'm just looking at the audience, and we're a majority of women. And I just have a question in my mind about what that is saying about this issue. Just putting it out there.
Is that meant to be left as a rhetorical question, or are you going to try and actually... You're not going to try and answer it at all. It is a note. I would say, sure, 90% of the delegates who are in the House are actually all females. And therefore, is this a topic that resonates more with women generally? Is it the space that we're focusing on more? We don't know. I suppose it's a question we're going to be pondering on. Thank you very much, ladies. Looking forward to it. Now, Peter, we didn't get you here for no reason whatsoever. You obviously are with the D School Africa. You're head of shared services here. For those who are visiting this space for the first time, tell them a little bit about it.
Sure, thank you. Good morning and welcome to everybody in the audience and those online. It is our absolute pleasure to be hosting this festival for the next 2 days and really trying to unpack what the circular economy is, and also to see where we as a D school, with our methodology and our training and teaching methods, could play a role in impacting the circular economy and the work that has been done around sustainability, really thinking global and acting local, and what we could do within that space. The space that you're sitting in today has been donated through the Hasso Plattner Foundation. A gentleman by the name of Hasso Plattner, he is the founder of SAP, stumbled across a magazine in 2004. Tim Brown, David Kelly, they were at Stanford University, and he started the first D school at Stanford University in 2004. Design thinking is ingrained in the DNA of SAP today because of his firm belief of what it can do for his organization, and because of the impact that it had on his organization, he has felt the importance of bringing that down and sharing that skill and knowledge with others. Subsequently opened up the Potsdam D School in Germany in 2007, and in 2015, the D School Afrika at UCT started as an incubator at the GSB, and officially had its first program in 2016. Through the last few years, there was a need and a call to construct a purpose-built design thinking facility within UCT, to enable us to reach the students. And the big focus of Hasso Plattner and his generosity is to have an impact with students. Everything he says, and I've been fortunate to meet him, everything he says, what are you doing for the students and how are you sharing and imparting knowledge for the future to enable them to have the necessary skills and mindsets which we teach so meticulously through our coaches here at the D School, so they, over the long term, can make a difference and have an impact on things like a circular economy, and really to be able to let them think global and act local, as we as D School Africa plan to take this model deep into Africa. So while we're sitting on the foot of the African continent at the moment, we've already started and engaged and collected quite a bit of data of institutions across Africa, where we can really go spread our wings and have an impact on the African continent and just not here in Cape Town. We are extremely pleased and proud to have you. I certainly am excited about the next 2 days. When I wanted to register, it was full and I needed to make some calls, but I got told there's a seat somewhere for me in the house. And to join you wonderful ladies, it's absolutely amazing. And being Women's Month, to be surrounded with such powerful women. So welcome, and we really look forward to what you have to offer and to share. Thank you.
Peter, thank you very much, and thank you for having us. It really, really is a wonderful facility. Thank you once again then to Peter, to Helene, and to Erica. Now we're going to be introducing you to our panel members who are going to be helping us discuss and debate this incredible topic. Coming up first will be Dr. Pippa Norton, who's a director and principal consultant at the Greenhouse, a director of TGH ThinkSpace NPC, and an adjunct associate professor here at the University of Cape Town. Alongside her is Katarina Giring. Katarina is an executive member of the African Circular Economy Network and currently coordinates and implements projects such as Just to CE, as well as Circular South Africa. Kirsten Barnes, wow, it is really a powerful women panel today, is a circular economy analyst and the project lead for the SA Plastics Pact, which we did have an initial conversation about 3 months ago around what the Pact is in South Africa and how it's impacting. She describes herself as being passionate about the challenges and the opportunities at the intersection of society. And joining us via streaming, and poor man is on leave and has decided to take aside 2 hours of his life and being on holiday, is Bert Caseman, owner and director of MetaSUS. Bert has a background in mechanical engineering and has developed into an international clean technology broker, promoting exports and cooperation in waste management, the circular economy, wastewater treatment, soil remediation, air quality, as well as renewable energy. We will be joined later by Salim Haider, who is the Director of Waste Management at the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning within the Provincial Government of the Western Cape. He's attending to some business at the moment and promised to be here by 11 o'clock. Ladies, gentlemen, it's lovely to have you here. Happy Women's Month.
Thank you.
Let's start with you, Pippa. What does the circular economy mean for people who don't know? And more importantly, can we apply it in a South African context that will be beneficial to all South Africans?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. You're lovely to be here in this a very powerful women environment. It's great, and a few guys. Nice to have you too. But yes, really good. So for me, I think circular economy really means meeting the needs of society as an environmentally less damaging way as possible. So least emissions, meeting the needs, because we do, need to meet development needs, certainly in South Africa. Is my mic?
I think we've just lost the mic for a second. Just let me check whether it's on or not.
It is on, yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay. Mic number 2.
Yeah, so as I said, is this on?
Yeah.
So it's meeting needs with least emissions and environmental damage, and then not preventing future generations from meeting needs, and so not doing anything that damages the future. So that's sort of encapsulating the idea of sustainability, I guess. So, and absolutely, we can certainly do it within South Africa in context. In fact, I think we have a lot of advantages in that a lot of our developments is sort of starting, we leapfrog. We don't have to copy. We can really leapfrog and do things our way and do it the right way and not necessarily go down the route of environmental damage.
And what are some of those advantages that South Africa has?
I think we see it now just almost with energy and all the solar panels going up. We saw it with cell phones. A lot of them, we never got that infrastructure of needing all those cables and lines out to rural areas because, we had cell phones. So we kind of leapfrogged that need. And I think we could be doing it maybe with energy now. We kind of can go straight to the better technologies of renewable technologies. Maybe in transport and mobility, maybe we can take this. As we're doing with our energy crisis, maybe the transport crisis, we find ways that don't just copy and actually find ways that we can get people or get to work in places that actually kind of are environmentally, avoid the tried and what's the established solutions. So I think that's kind of what I mean.
What is the saying? Don't waste a good crisis.
Yeah, that's pretty much,
We have a good crisis at the moment.
Yeah,
so
very much. We have so many crises.
Sadly. Katerina, you with ASAN, of course ASAN being the African Circular Economy Network. Tell us a little bit about your organization and the work that you do.
So ASAN has been started in 2015 as a coffee club by the 3 directors. And then in 2017 we registered as an MPO in South Africa, and now we're actually present across 42 African countries. We have 500 plus members, and we basically almost collect the circular economy experts across the continent, which is really amazing. So last year we actually also organized the World Circular Economy Forum alongside Sutra in Rwanda and had 5 African studios. And there is a great movement in Africa, and circular economy has been practiced here just out of necessity. If you look back at indigenous knowledge, how people just built houses, right? There is a lot of knowledge on the continent, we just have maybe not labeled it as circular, but it is there, and I think we just need to actually make that voice heard and also implement those solutions that are already out there. So I think we actually have almost like an advantage. We can learn from mistakes that we see in the global north almost.
So if it already exists on the African continent, what are some of the best practice examples, if you like, that we can look to? Because I think somebody who's a being introduced to the concept for the first time, they're going, I don't know what you're talking about. Whereas if there is an example that says, look what Rwanda did in relation to this is how they applied circular economy principles to obviously realize a better outcome.
Maybe I come in from the social perspective, because the circular economy has been predominantly waste or resource focused, right? But it needs to be socially focused. It needs to enhance the well-being of communities. And I think in general, Africa, people have the sense of community and the urgency of supporting one another. And I think that's where the circular economy comes in as a regenerative and as a resilient concept. So I think around green building, we see the indigenous knowledge, medical plans that we actually have. That kind of knowledge is lost, but it's there, right? We can actually implement that already as well. And how we just use resources. Unfortunately, that has been done out of necessity because people need to gain employment and they need to gain an income. But people, they are actually really, really good in filtering out resources that are being dumped by communities and not being seen as, valuable.
Yeah, and Kirsten, that's where GreenCape has been playing in a major way, right? Where South Africa Manane buys a product, I consume it, and then I go, I don't need the packaging, the excess. Perhaps I thought it was going to be a nice product, but it's no longer nice, so therefore they may get rid of it. You're looking for ways of how we can utilize that in a way that we can, I suppose, bring it back into the economy somehow.
Yeah, and I love that, the way that we can rethink that, because it really does need that system change. So when you spoke about just where do we normally intersect with products? We intersect with products in a store, we see it no longer has use for us individually, and then we get rid of it very quickly. But I think, and Kat referenced some sort of indigenous knowledge and the way that we think about resources differently. And I think if we actually saw, like this notebook, for example, if we could actually see the amount of work and time and resources and investment that went into the extraction of the resources, the growing even of the trees, the extraction of the resources, the manufacture of the product, the distribution of that product, the retail, why then do we then use this piece of paper, think, oh, I made a mistake, my handwriting is not that great, as you can see, so let's just throw it out and throw it away. But it's almost like we're dishonoring that resource there. But I also want to ensure that we don't just focus on the environmental. So Kat also referenced the social. And it's critical in our space at the moment that we see the socio-economic opportunities. And it's useful that circular economy as a concept has almost entered our narrative through an environmental lens, but it can't stay there. Because clearly, I mean, just the situation we see today and where many of our people who live in South Africa find themselves, we cannot speak an environmental narrative. We need to speak socioeconomics. And I think what is beautiful to see is if we actually build in systems that value our resources, there is a true business case. And that's not just something that we can see in South Africa. There's many global studies that have verified this in a range of different contexts. So I think maybe a decade ago, a circular economy was something which was a nice to have in the European context. It was maybe driven through an environmental narrative or driven through a narrative of let's retain resources to fuel our own development and growth. But now what we see is that the circular economy narrative and perspective is also being seen played out and really implemented in a developing country context. And we're seeing the benefits of that, and they go far beyond the environmental.
Because there will be people in Kailicha right now who are, yes, frustrated by the taxi strike, but they would have needed to get onto a taxi to come into town to look for work. And that's their priority right now, right? They need a job in order to feed their families, take their children to school, take care of their health and welfare and all those other needs. And you're right, if you tell me that I need to think circular economy from an environmental aspect, I'm going, that's a luxury. And it's a luxury I can't entertain if I'm hungry and I have a basic need.
Exactly, and we're seeing many different examples spring up. And I think we need to make sure that as South Africa, we're also learning from other developing country contexts. So what we've seen, for example, in the reuse narrative within a circular economy, it's clear that a circular economy isn't only one approach. It's got to be a suite of approaches, and we've got to think upstream. Circular economy for some has been a recycling economy, but what are we putting into our system? What are we adding to our system, and what is the potential value for that resource over multiple life cycles? So what we see in places like Chile, India, Kenya, we see there are very good examples of reuse and refill systems which are driven, as Kat mentioned, through a local need. And in our own country, we have an example of Gwalisa, which is active in Alexandra. We have Triple Shine. And what they're doing is they're bringing resources closer to people, making it more accessible in a way which actually reduces the cost to people, because people will bring their own containers. So you're not paying for the packaging over and over again. And Pip has actually done a fantastic study for us looking at the potential of such reuse refill systems in our context. And it doesn't have to be high tech. I'm not saying there's no place for high tech, that there's no place for AI in our context, but it doesn't have to be. And there's some beautiful, I wish Gwalisa was here right now, I could tell you more about their exciting initiative, and we'll make sure we link such initiatives to more people.
Absolutely. We've got obviously email addresses of our delegates, so therefore we'll be able to share details and links to Gwalisa. But firstly, thank you very much for taking time out of your holiday to come and chat to us. We've heard from Kirsten around how this circular economy certainly works from a developing nation's point of view, and we can see not only from an environmental lens, but also from a society lens, how this can be of benefit. What of developed nations? Are you seeing the benefits as well? I think you are on mute, but I can see your mouth moving, but I can't hear you. Yeah, now we can hear you. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, actually, I'm in a restaurant, and they're cleaning up the restaurant, so there may be a bit of sound here and there.
That's fine.
Good morning, everyone. Very happy to be with you. Very interesting, of course, the topic. Very interesting also that, as you pointed out, 90% of the audience is female. That is actually a very positive sign, because we noticed, and I organize business missions on the topic of waste management and circular economy to all kinds of places, and normally the delegations are mainly male. And lately, we have been hearing comments about that, frankly. And the fact that now obviously the balance has shifted quite drastically, actually, gives me a lot of confidence that in the future we will hear less of these comments to our business missions, so to the composition of our business missions. But to the topic, you are saying the circular economy. What does it mean for a country maybe like the Netherlands? Well, it means quite a lot. Frankly, one of the questions you asked, is it really possible to implement circular economy options, circular economy measures in a society that is basically still linear? And frankly, that is quite a question, and frankly, that is precisely why it is such a challenge to do that. Because yes, our society is still mainly linear, also in the Netherlands, and we have this goal that we want to be halfway circular in 2030, which is only 7 years from now. And we want to be fully circular in 2050, which is just 27 years from now. And frankly, that is going to be an incredible challenge, because precisely because of that, because our whole system is still linear, and also, of course, frankly, the system inside our heads is still linear, inside my head also. To be frank, it requires a complete change. For instance, it requires that we start to recognize the so-called externalities of everything we're doing. When we put products out on the market, we take all we take from the nature and from the resources. We take that for.
It's not load shedding.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, you got stuck there for a second, and we're wondering whether it's because of load shedding here in South Africa, which is a lived experience for us here in the country, sadly.
And I know it now because I was in South Africa like 10 days ago for a week, and I learned to know the concept of load shedding. Yes, but so we have to make a giant paradigm shift in also in our own heads, and I think that is a tremendous challenge that we're facing also in the Netherlands, and frankly, to make it to make these goals that I was just mentioning, it's going to be an uphill battle, but also it's going to be a fantastic journey that we're going to make, all of us. And frankly, when I'm addressing a younger audience, I always say that I actually envy that audience, because to be part of that change is absolutely a fantastic process.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about MetaSous and how you came to found it, and what are you doing in the waste management space?
Yes. Okay. So yes, MetaSous is the goal I have is to promote international cooperation and business in environmental technologies. And you mentioned all kinds of subsectors of that, but I focus mainly on waste management and circular economy. And so what I do is I monitor the companies in the Netherlands that are basically the suppliers of products and services and expertise to the waste sector and to the circular economy sector. And then I scan markets. I do. And then I try to mobilize the Dutch companies to become active in those markets. And that is precisely what we're doing right now in the case of South Africa, because there will be a business mission the end of October, 16th to 20th of October, of Dutch entrepreneurs to South Africa, and eager to find partners, business partners in South Africa, to see whether they can do a business and maybe go for a longer involvement of business promotion and also private sector development in Africa. So that's basically what I do, and I do it with colleagues who do similar things also in the waste and circular economy sector, and together we try to also spread the word, and I do that also as so-called special envoy of the Holland Circular Hotspot. Maybe you've heard about that. That's a Dutch organization trying to spread the word on circularity and the Dutch approach to it worldwide, basically. And so now and then I do events in that framework also.
All right. And of course, we'll share the dates of that business mission with the delegates. I'm sure Helene will extend an invitation to those who are here.
Yeah.
Let me ask this question of you, Peppa. If Afrika Melane, whatever the company, creates a product, and I'm saddled with the responsibility of making sure that whatever waste comes from the consumption of my product, I am responsible for, will it not address half of the problem that we're sitting with in the world right now?
Absolutely. I mean, as if you're saying that when you conceive of a product, you are already thinking of where it's going after it's been used. Because I think that has been the tragedy of what's happened. I mean, certainly when you look at plastic, it's a no-brainer. If we just carry on making something that's not ever disappearing, there's going to be a problem down the line. I see it in my own family where we have the bin, recycling bin, and people keep on putting things in, and no one's emptying it. And it's like, well, it's kind of obvious, you know, eventually it's going to overflow. Somebody has to. Going to have to go away. And I think that's been the major flaw in thinking. So yes, if every company started out thinking about where their products were going, in the long run, it would be a completely different ballgame. And I think that's where it's so critical, because it sits at the design stage, because that's when you've got the leverage. You choose the materials that will degrade and not the material that will just accumulate, or the material that has value that will be collected and brought back into the economy. And it's early on that is really locked in.
Yeah.
And it's also, you know, where in your use phase, perhaps your product, you need to design, be thinking about how it's going to be used. There's a lot of resources going to be used, it's like a car. A lot of resources, maybe you make your product very eco-friendly, but then in its use phase, it uses a lot of resources. So you've also got to think of how your consumer is going to be using your product, and are they going to be generating a lot of resources, pouring in gallons of, you know, oil into it and getting emissions that way. So you've really got to be thinking through the whole life cycle of your product, from its raw materials, how it's used, and then what happens to it in disposal. And really critical in the circular, I mean, I think someone mentioned the circular economy became the recycling economy, but really not. What it should be is keeping your product in use for as long as possible, because those are the products with the lowest overall emission, environmental impact, is those that can be used for a long time period. But then that's very difficult as a company, because our linear thinking, and I think that's Bert said, it's really, we've got this mindset where you want to sell as many units as possible. You make something and you've got to sell lots of them to make money. So then it kind of makes no sense for you to make something that lasts a long time, because you're just going to not sell as many. But you've got this tension, because the most environmentally or most circular product is one that will last a long time. So there we move to different business models, like product service system models, where you're selling the service and not the product.
Yeah.
So if you're selling the service and we're seeing this so much, I mean, I think subscription models are really becoming much more common. Actually, this morning, only because we're doing renovations, I use the laundry subscription service. Fantastic. They arrive at my gate, they take my laundry away, and they're going to bring it back clean. I could do without a washing machine and a dryer. I'm only doing that because currently I don't have access to my washing machine and dryer, but maybe now, long term, this is brilliant. So imagine all the numbers of washers and dryers we could avoid if there was one central place, you know, especially if they were picking it up in an efficient way. You know, you've got to balance off, you know, it's using now coming to fetch my laundry, that also has emissions. So it's product service systems also have, you know, emissions, and obviously there's still emissions when you wash in somebody else's machines. But that would be a way of decreasing the number of machines. And if your product had been to provide clean clothes, let's say, now you are providing the service of cleaning people's clothes rather than selling them washers and dryers, which would be a sort of a linear model versus a slightly more circular. But of course, those big commercial washers and dryers also need to be recycled at the end of life, or, you know, so there is still consumption, but you're just decreasing the amount sort of materials.
As a person who lives exclusively with laundromats, I can tell you there is a saving. There's a saving in terms of cost, because you're not drawing as much electricity on your own energy, so you're paying less to the municipality for electricity, and as you say, the additional benefits, of course, of having a collection of clothes done together as opposed to just yours. But they're making a reference to the Netherlands being, well, setting itself a target of being half circular economy by 2030 and fully circular economy by 2050, and highlighting those challenges. According to a study from Professor Hasso von Plattner and his colleagues, South Africa is currently sitting at 7% circular. Are we allowed to even start dreaming about half circular and full circular economies?
I mean, I think you have to be ambitious, otherwise, nothing then will happen. And I think, that is reflecting, which is good to see those sort of numbers, because I think, we need that reality check, that the vast majority of our consumption is still linear. Even though we all hate plastics, plastics actually have a relatively high recycling, relative to the global north, actually. Some of our plastic recycling rates, and Kirsten can certainly give all the details here, are actually far higher than match at the global north. So we're actually not doing that badly relative to the rest, sort of to Europe and certainly to the US. But it is still a good wake-up call of how very linear most of our material use is. So certain materials, sort of something like a metal, aluminium, or iron, that absolutely is recycled at a very high rate. But most of our other materials are either, at a really low rate or completely linear. And I think what also gets missed when we think we're going to be able to implement circularity through recycling is that it's, other than, and even with metals, but to a much smaller degree, there's no 100% circularity through recycling. Ultimately, there's a lot of downcycling, so you go from a high quality to a medium, if you're lucky, quality material down to a low quality material that's ultimately still going to require disposal. So we're always we're never going to reach circularity through a recycling economy by reusing things. So that's why I think it's really stressing this, keeping materials, keeping products in service, reusing as much as we can before we get to the recycling, because we'll always be at those low numbers, I think, if we don't actually build in reuse into the model, sort of into our economy.
Somebody's phone is going off.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that song.
Let's keep then with you, Kirsten. I imagine the SA Plastics Pact is in a big way a contributor as to why we're seeing such a great success in terms of, at the very least, the recycling of plastic products.
Thanks, Afrika. I think we've built on an existing recycling system in South Africa. So what we've seen is that our recycling economy was, I think, largely built on a voluntary extended producer responsibility system. So very few products in our current system have sufficient value end of life that there's almost an organic, and I don't mean compost, but almost an organic circulation. So we need some sort of producer responsibility that you referenced earlier. And voluntary EPR took us relatively far. But I think also we do need to look at why we managed to achieve such good recycling rates. And it goes to our traumatic history as a country, and it goes to the huge divide. And if we look at the informal sector, so waste pickers and reclaimers, some would prefer the word reclaimers because we're reclaiming valuable material from a waste stream. And if we look at that, there's a large percentage of our material currently entering recycling plants that is recovered through the informal sector. And that's because also the informal sector has been working for very limited income. And happily, we can say our mandatory extended producer responsibility regulations is making some steps towards changing that. There's still a lot of work to be done, but now, before we haven't honored that collection and that service that we are benefiting from. So we can claim these wonderful recycling rates. And yes, we have an excellent recycling industry, and yes, there are good formal collectors. But actually, most of the material entering our recycling plants is first accessed through the informal sector. And we're not paying for that service. So, and we can maybe feel good about it as consumers. We can put out material next to our general waste bin and say, well, at least I'm making the material available. It's more dignified than someone having to search through my bin. But we're still not paying for that service. And that's something which our extended producer responsibility regulations are trying to close the gap on. And they're requiring industry to pay a collection service fee. So, don't ask me where we're at currently in terms of the amount of the service fee, but at least the principle is there. We've got something we can work with.
What happens to that service fee? So, who's collecting it? And more importantly, if Mr. Hendricks, for example, who is a reclaimer, and I do like that term, in my street, does he get benefit from that fee?
Yes, so what we've had in our extended producer responsibility regulations, and it does introduce a lot of complexity, because what we see currently is our informal sector. I think there was a study done a few years back where on average an informal sector enterprise in the recovery of materials is 1.2 people. So what that tells you, it's a lot of individuals. But the picture that doesn't give is actually the informal collaboration or cooperation which already exists among reclaimers. And we're now starting to see more of an organization. So this is a long way of answering your question. But producers, so PROs and producers are required to pay a service fee to informal collectors. And there's a definition of informal collectors in our EPR regulations. So that means at the first point of recovery from a bin and even from a landfill, so from reclaimers, those who are working in the informal sector, is that the PROs are required to pay a fee directly to reclaimers who are registered on our National Waste Picker registration platform. So that's the formal name of that platform. That platform is now going to be hosted under the Producer Responsibility Organization Alliance, the PRO Alliance, which is the 6 or 7, I'm not sure of the number right now on the spot, but the biggest producer responsibility organizations in packaging in the country. And they then need to oversee the rollout of that registration system. And then we have wonderful organizations in South Africa. So reclaimer-led organization. So the African Reclaimers Organization, which is also one of our members as the South African Plastics Pact, and many in this room have been working closely with them. There's also the South African Waste Pickers Association, and there's many other enterprises who are working closely as reclaimers themselves to organize. And they're also playing a very key role in the rollout of this registration platform. And I think what's been a key message, which often we've missed, I mean, my dad was an engineer, and I come from more a science background, so I could have said, I can design a system, I can see where the resources are, and I'm looking from an eagle eye view, and I'm not seeing the people, and I can design what's best. But what we found over and over again is we don't actually know what's best. We're not a reclaimer who has an excellent knowledge of materials, knows where to find them, and knows where to trade. So that there's a dual expertise that we're not acknowledging. And often we find organizations, and I did this myself with a group of people, we decided we wanted to design a system that would benefit reclaimers in a local area, and we invited reclaimers to comment, and we invited them in to be part of, but we didn't involve them in the design.
Yeah.
And that was a fatal flaw in the system. We didn't actually recognize the expertise. So it's quite embarrassing to reference that on stage and have it streamed. But literally, that's what we've seen repeated over and over again. But the reclaimers organizing for reclaimers, and a key part of the registration system, I love the way the team has developed this and led with Arrow and Prof. Sampson of the University of Johannesburg and SALPA and the PROs, is designing a system that understands the current networks that exist and then allows reclaimers to verify reclaimers. So there's an internal verification and check and balance. And it's not actually, if you say informal sector, I think the picture for a lot of people, for us maybe in the more formal sector, is chaos and a lack of efficiency. But that is actually not the case. We've got some excellent examples, and it's not always, the case, but we've got some brilliant examples of much better efficiency within those current more organic systems and networks than we could have designed from our so-called eagle's eye view, pretending that we can see the best way forward and the best way to benefit people actually involved in the system. I mean, looking back on my former self, that was a very arrogant place to start from.
Yeah. And Katerina, I suppose that is an example of, yes, we are dealing with an environmental issue, but we're having an impact on societal issues there.
Absolutely. It's quite interesting. There was a study done this year, actually, Circular Economy did a study around what is the labor dimension around circular economy, and they found, well, 60% of our world population that are working in employment are informal, but we are completely missing them in policy and strategies. So just think about it, 60% of people work in the informal sector globally, right? And we just completely miss them. And that is quite detrimental, actually, because as Kirsten said, they're well organized, they have amazing knowledge on the ground. And I mean, informality goes beyond the waste sector, right? Just textile sector around trading. So yes, there are fantastic examples, but we need to acknowledge that more. And I mean, in South Africa, we have the waste picker integration guidelines that municipalities are supposed to also start implementing. So that we have come a really long way, which is fantastic to see. But in other countries, the informal sector is still being seen as dirty and is not valued.
Yeah.
And that is something we need to change that narrative. And believe it or not, in Europe, there's also informal sectors happening in certain countries. So it's not just something that the global south is facing, but we also see it actually in Europe happening and taking place.
Bert, actually, let's bring you in now. What is the picture in the global north? I imagine the context is very different to what South Africa is, where we have the majority of the population living below the poverty line, unemployed often, particularly young people, and therefore resorting to being part of a system that is the informal sector. In the Netherlands, I would imagine it's the other way around, right?
Yes. By the way, you can hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay. It is quite a different picture because, of course, you know, in my youth, I remember that there was an informal sector playing a role in the waste management system. But bit by bit, that role has disappeared a little bit, and frankly, lately it's coming back a little bit because, and that's precisely because of those systems of extended producer responsibility. Actually, these systems have been quite successful in the Netherlands. In professionalizing waste collection, separate collection, also creating a new income stream for the sector, which was very important. And of course, you have the element of the polluter pays in these systems of extended producer responsibility. Now we are broadening the product range that the EPR systems apply to. We are now extending it into textiles, for instance. But one thing we did recently, way too late in my view, was creating deposit return systems for small PET bottles and also for cans. So now cans, discarded cans and PET bottles have a value which is 15 cents of a euro in the Netherlands with this special logo they have. And so that has changed the scenery tremendously, because in my free time sometimes I do some waste picking myself, you know, in a group. We try to tidy up a little bit our village. And not many cans. Now, one goal of that new arrangement was to have less litter on the streets. Unfortunately, the opposite is happening at the moment, because you have people who are poor now trying to find and emptying basically waste containers to find those bottles, the PET bottles and the cans, and to change them for money in the supermarkets. So litter problem, at least for the moment, has increased. And, you know, I have very mixed feelings about this situation, because on the one hand, I think, okay, so this is an additional income stream for people who actually are very poor in the Netherlands, and these people exist. But on the other hand, this situation that these people are forced to look for discarded cans and discarded bottles to get at least some money to get through the day, that is a situation that should not exist in the Netherlands, I think. So what it basically means is that our overall arrangement of social support, and also maybe to have like a base income for everyone, that should change. So it actually points towards social issues that are at this moment not arranged in a good way in the Netherlands.
I can assure you, but we're having a very complex and complicated conversation around the introduction of a universal basic income grant in South Africa.
Okay.
And I fully agree with you.
Okay.
No one should ever have to earn an income picking through waste. But I suppose what we're acknowledging here is that there is already quite a complex system that exists that we can actually maximize benefit from, not only from the environment, but also in addressing some of these socio-economic challenges that present themselves in a South African context.
Yeah. No, I completely recognize that, of course, and so you know, in general, for instance, in South Africa, and in many countries of the world, recycling, for instance, actually is predominantly carried out by waste pickers and the whole infrastructure around it. And they should be recognized for that and supported and also, for instance, through systems of extended producer responsibility. I think it's a fantastic idea to actually support them through part of the proceeds of such a system. So I think that's a fantastic idea.
Indeed, thank you very much. Now joining us on stage is Salim Haider, who is the Director of Waste Management at the Department of Environmental Affairs and Development Planning for the provincial government. Salim, lovely to see you again. Thank you for joining us. I hope your meeting was productive.
Yes, it was. Thank you, Afrika, and welcome to my fellow panelists and also to our guests in the audience. And sorry for gate crashing your party.
You're most welcome.
I know I've missed the bulk of what was discussed. It's going to be difficult just getting in, but yeah, one can always grab the gist and the bits of it.
Well, let me shoot off then with the first question for you. What from a government point of view, are some of the on-the-ground challenges that you as a department are facing when it comes to, I suppose, the realities, right? The lived experience of many people in the solid waste management process?
One of the key problems that we've got is the backlogs that municipalities are currently facing, and I think these are legacy issues that's been coming on for a number of years, particularly around solid waste. As we all know, it was all about landfilling. Not landfilling, it was actually all about dumping, because even landfilling has got a good connotation to it when done appropriately, and this is not the case. So we have actually done a calculation. This was back in 2016, and I'm sure we could actually double that figure. What is the cost to make up the backlog in terms of getting everything back on even keel, in terms of ensuring there's appropriate waste management in the province? And that figure in 2016 was about just under 2 billion rand.
Wow.
That figure
And just to be clear, that's a figure just for the province of the Western Cape.
The province of the Western Cape. So I would say one can actually double it up to about 4 billion. So a lot of municipalities have got those sort of challenges in terms of having to make up the backlog in order to actually get to where they need to be. So there's a lot of catch-up. Also with regards to the appropriate, let's say, resources that needs to be in place. Waste management was just never really budgeted for appropriately. The technical expertise was never really given due consideration. And in fact, from our previous discussion that we had with the special rapporteur that's here from the UN, it's just, what's the impact in terms of encroachment? So there's quite a lot of issues that's there. From a government perspective, we need to move away from where we are currently to where we need to go towards a circular economy for, I'm sure, all reasons explained beforehand, but the opportunities, the social well-being, and just the economic opportunities that's there is just tremendous. But how do we transcend from backlog to where we are?
That's a brilliant question, Salim. Do you want to offer an answer to it?
Solve it.
In fact, we are, at this point in time, finance has always been a sticky thing, particularly in provincial governments where there's been a lot of cost cuts, particularly since the COVID sort of crisis. But Provincial Treasury has actually put a 3 billion program offer together, and I am looking at that very diligently for waste management, because that could actually solve 75% of the problem. We wouldn't be able to do it in the structure that we are in, because how do you spend 3 billion? It's already difficult spending millions, let alone billions. But this is the sort of financial impetus that's needed to break the back of that camel so we can actually get to the part where we can now push towards the new way of handling waste in this province in particular. Not just the province, we actually need to look around the country as well, because everything is very much around cooperative governance, and I think there's a big part that can play. So that is our big hope that we've got. It's not going to be easy. It's going to require a lot of convincing, because to date, the priority for waste management has been very poor financially. In terms of putting it actually on the sort of spectrum, it's always high up there, but the funds never went with the priority itself. And I think these are the areas that we need to just make.
So you've got a challenge of ensuring that the management of solid waste is prioritized within not only province, but also, more importantly, the municipalities, that financing is made available for that, and you then have a paradigm shift within the governance as far as moving towards a circular economy, because a lot of the earlier parts are happening in the linear economy, aren't they?
That is correct, but we also follow the lead from the National Waste Management Strategy 2020 in particular, which was actually transformed from where it was from its previous edition to actually run wholly on a circular economy principle, and that is actually embedded right through all the sort of key strategic priority areas that's there. And that needs to transcend from national down to provincial to local government as such, and that is really what we need to get to. But how to get there and what needs to be done to actually implement is where the big ground is.
Once again, beautiful questions. Do you have an answer for that?
Yes, we have identified. In fact, the national government has done an important study, which was the Waste Economy Master Plan, which is about to be released shortly, where it was estimated, and this figure has come through since 2011, there's about 17 billion rands worth of resources that's buried annually. We don't want to grab all 17 billion, but if we can get to parts of it, that will make a big difference to where we need to go in terms of waste. So, key areas of what is it that we need to target, what are the big ticket areas that we need to go for, and organic waste management is definitely one of them, because these things can easily be delocalized. Food security and the food sort of shortage is paramount in this country. Our soils need to be replenished, so there's a huge sort of spin-off from a circular biological perspective where a lot of that would actually come in. Anaerobic digestion is also sort of coming to the fore, and I'm glad to announce that although seen as a failure before, the plant that's in Athlone is hoped to come up in May of next year, and that will also take a huge pressure off organic waste in terms of converting that into biogas, which could be used to supplement some of our energy sort of needs that's there.
That is tweetable, by the way. Tweet that, hashtag Co-Create Design Festival, because that's big news. That site has been a wonderful resource and opportunity that has been completely underutilized by province and city.
Yeah, not province, maybe even not city. It's a private investment opportunity that has come up. I think it's been found to have been incorrectly designed. So a lot of that has been re-looked at, and in fact, for anyone that's in the field of maybe waste, that's looking for conveyors, etc., there's a cheap opportunity to get 8 months old plant equipment to actually just flog it off. But that is in order to actually just get it to design and operate to what it needs to be. So it's a lot more focused. Previously it was focused on mixed municipal waste, which was a problem. But now they're actually focusing predominantly on clean organics and such. So yeah, I think there's a big improvement, a big drive. Recruitment has already commenced, and they've got a license in place already to actually operate. So yeah, all fingers crossed again for May 2024.
Let's hope so.
This is one of the sort of interventions.
Kirsten, that must excite you. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done, no doubt, but it's certainly thinking in the right direction, isn't it?
Definitely, and I'm really liking the focus that we're now looking at the clean streams, and I think that's a very good principle that we need to think about in terms of our materials, that we try and maintain materials in a consistency within a material type. So we see a lot of applications currently in terms of the circular economy which mix very different material types together, and then what happens is end of life of that product means it's very low value. So if we look at problematic plastics, for example, that can't be mechanically recycled, going into a concrete block, so the messaging is that it's better insulation, that there's other properties within it. But what happens to that concrete block end of life? And maybe you immobilize it for a little bit longer than it would have been. But if you think of the lifespan of a plastic material, that was going to outlive that concrete block in general. It's going to outlive that application. So then when you break it down end of life, you're not able to recover that concrete in the same way you would have been able to recover a concrete block that is a concrete block, that doesn't have other materials mixed in. So I think the use of the material at its highest and the maintenance of the material at its highest possible value is very key. And some of the design issues that came in previously, and it's the sort of unexpected. So around the time of the plant operation, which just created more of an issue, was our drought, which meant that a lot of the mixed waste then it had a very high mineral content, lots of sand, it was far drier and dustier, and as a result, the extraction of the organic material, they weren't able to extract the amount and the quality that was predicted on a previous waste categorization. So maintaining material, it's far easier to handle, and still within biogas, you still can't just put in anything and get something out. You've got to keep the bugs happy. You know, they like a particular recipe. They have particular meal requirements. You can't just mix any waste together. So therefore, having cleaner streams, you're able to mix in the right proportion. Maybe you need to mix in a bit of garden waste with a bit of post-consumer food waste. And I think that's also key. But I think even if we think of the volumes that might go into that plant, we still need to think upstream. And I'm going to take us back to plastics briefly. Sorry, Salim, from your organics. So if my colleague Sam was here, he would be focusing on organics. But from the plastics, we know from global modeling studies, a Breaking the Plastic Wave model, which was the Pew Charitable Trusts, in particular, led that study with a range of excellent partners. And what they found is no matter how developed the country setting, the volume that we have to handle of the waste and the growing problem we have, the growing consumption, the growing wastage, there is no system internationally that will be able to collect, recover, recycle, keep that in circulation. We always have to think upstream. We have to think reduction. We have to think about the way we design. We have to think the way that we purchase food, the way we handle food in our homes, the way the retailers manage that food chain. We have to think of the whole system, and it's got to start with a reduction, and it's got to start with an upstream design.
There's a wonderful fruit and vegetable store at Montebello, which is one of the areas not too far from here, and you literally bring your own basket. And you pick your fruit and vegetables, you weigh it, you pay, it goes into your basket, and you leave. Not a single shred of plastic that is consumed in that process. And obviously, as you peel your fruits and vegetables, you then go into an organic compost, and so forth and so forth. And life is hunky-dory. But that happens in the minority, unfortunately, as opposed to the majority. Now, Katerina, to shift gears a little bit, government has an obligation, including realizing or helping to realize the constitutional right that we all have to a clean environment, right? There are opportunities that certainly producers of product and service can exploit in helping us manage all of this. But ultimately, we're all human beings, and we have to take some responsibility. How do we shift that paradigm from a society point of view?
That's a very good question. I've asked myself that a lot as well, because I mean, we have spoken again a lot about resources, right? But as Kirsten says, it has to happen upstream. And I think Bert alluded to the fact that it also has to happen in our heads, right? It's around norms and values and how we associate with one another, how we associate with products. I think it's also about how we communicate scientific knowledge, right? Like the CSIR has done amazing studies around the circular economy, but it hasn't really been taken up in national government. You can see it here and there are policies, the DTIC is doing their master plans, but it's almost, again, it's very much a siloed approach from what I've seen. I think there is a drive and there is definitely more motivation to streamline things, but we need to streamline it even more. And I think from a consumer perspective, this is all super overwhelming, right? So we had COVID, now we have climate change, we have the triple challenge in our country, and now we're coming around, oh, yeah, please also implement a circular economy and bring your bag along. That is complex. So we need to break it down in the language that is understandable for all the different consumers, and it also speaks to the language that we're using, right? It's predominantly English, but we also need to encourage other languages that are included in the conversation. I don't have, I think, the clear-cut answer, but I think it needs to be more collaborative, it needs to be more co-creation happening, that we actually include the different stakeholders and the different parties, and only then people take ownership. And they also have to obviously believe in it, right? It's like I'm that passionate about it because I believe in the concept, and others have to be as passionate about it, and I think then we see that change happening on the ground.
And that's going to be the challenge, isn't it, Pippa? Because in South Africa, I think we still need to educate a lot of people about what the circular economy is. And once they've been educated and they're aware of it, they then need to be convinced to make the switch to the circular economy.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It really at the heart of a lot of certainly of the reuse. We're talking about, we're never going to achieve circularity just with recycling, so maybe that has less consumer, I mean, we would still preferably require consumers to maybe separate into wet and dry waste or whatever, but less consumer. But if we're going into the reuse models, it's really a lot about changing behavior, consumer behavior. You know, simple things like if the idea is keeping materials in you know, at their highest value for a long time, the best thing is just to keep your clothes for a long time. But, you know, then we see that beautiful new dress, and we want that beautiful new dress, and we buy it, even though we know, actually, you know, we should be keeping the same clothes for 10, 15 years, but then we don't. So it's really around, you know, then maybe they're new, I'm pushing the products of system models, but so we can go to clothing libraries or buy secondhand or rentals sort of coming up. But then even that requires behavior change. It would require us to go to, you know, go online or pick clothes in a different sort of way, take clothes back to a store, pick up next month's clothes. So, you know, if any reuse system, bringing our reusable cup to the coffee, requires us to change behavior and buy-in. But I'm talking now from my affluent consumer point of view. What we were talking about at the beginning, where we actually have advantages, is that most circular solutions are actually cheaper solutions. So when we did the study that Kirsten was talking about for reusable packaging, yes, we kind of looked at it at first, we looked at it in a life cycle assessment study. We very much kind of the Europe view of in a retail setting, you know, and you have those refill machines, and this was detergent, and you can bring back your bottle and refill your detergent bottle, rather than buying a new one that goes away every time. But then when you look, and we're thinking, you know, so what are the incentives to make consumers do that? But when you look at for most consumers, the real driver there, and it's already done in many spaza shops because it's the most cost effective. If you have a big 5-liter drum of detergent and you can sell it off in small per weight, you know, so you're not buying that packaging, buying bulk volume and then selling it in packaging that somebody else's bottle that they bring in is the cheapest solution. So consumers are actually doing it not from an environmental principles, but just because it's the cheapest, most sensible way of making use of what they already have. And I think there we actually do have a real advantage in terms of being circular, because there are effective, efficient solutions that maybe we've forgotten about in our consumer-driven world that we live in, where we're told that we want new things, where we're told that we want, we're told that it's more convenient to buy disposable nappies. But why? Why is it less convenient than putting them in the washing machine?
Actually,
and taking
can we
them
just
out,
bring back the cloth nappies and the stereo nappy and everything that,
Because-
I mean, I used to have to help my mother and wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was a nuisance, but it was much better for the environment than what it is right now.
But the interesting thing is, because we worked a bit with the Nappy Alliance, and it was really interesting that we have this mindset that it's more convenient to get in our cars and go off to the supermarket maybe at 2 a.m. and find a pack of disposable nappies. But actually, why is that more convenient? Nowadays, the new reusable nappies aren't the old ones where they require sterilization and, like vats of horrible bleached water and all of that. They're really convenient. You can chuck them in your washing machine. In fact, and they come out and you hang them and they're pre-folded and you don't have to go to the shop all the time. Why is that more convenient or less convenient? So it's a lot of kind of brainwashing that goes on that tells us that we want to consume, we need to consume. And I think we're stuck in that paradigm, and somebody low income actually weirdly isn't in that paradigm, and in that way has almost an advantage that
No,
we
for sure.
we have.
I have 3 friends. I'll come to you now, Katrina. I have 3 friends who between them have 4 children, and literally they've come in the last 2 months. And the number of brand new, because now dads get, to invite their friends to a braai, and you need to bring a packet of nappies. 300 rand for just 92.
Yes.
I'm going, that is a lot of money.
Yeah.
I really don't understand why people are having children. I mean, it's lovely.
Having children.
It's lovely, I'm sure, but they're very expensive. You can tell I don't have any children, right? Sorry, Katrina, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, just maybe around consumer behavior is also, I think what Peter was alluding to is how do we structure our curricula and the skills that we teach the next generation and the next leaders is absolutely crucial. So this discussion needs to go further than the economic sectors that we have of agriculture, fashion, and so on, but it also needs to be education, right? And it can't just be engineers or me as a scientist, right? It needs to be almost cross-cutting. You need to have that kind of mindset. Already you have to give that to a student so that the students can actually work together in different disciplines. But it also has to trickle down in TVET colleges. It really needs to be implemented across the border. And I think while I was still working at UJ, we had an amazing training program also with the taking care of business, where we upskilled informal sector waste reclaimers actually to repair appliances, so they could make more money from it. Nice. So going up the ladder, right? It's really about the skills that we also transfer to the next generation and all kinds of level, right? It can already start in kindergarten almost.
No, for sure. Kirsten?
We're just dying to jump in at the moment. And I think also that we often have this almost narrative which focuses, and almost rhetoric, I want to say, which focuses on the consumer. Why aren't the consumers doing this? Why aren't they recycling? Why aren't they valuing their resources? But also, what is on offer for the consumers? And I completely support what Kat was saying with education. But I think collaboration, we've got to think system-wide. And what we often struggle with today is that product designers, brand owners, retailers, they're thinking about their sector and they're thinking about their bottom line. And extended producer responsibility is forcing a broader view. But what we have in the SA Plastics Pact, for example, is we have a collaboration across the value chain. So we have resin producers. So we have Safripol, who produces plastic resin, polymer. We have packaging manufacturers, brand owners, retailers, collectors, recyclers. And I love being facilitators in those meetings because the insights that are shared across the value chain, because when you're designing a product as a brand owner and your packaging, you are designing actually for a system as a whole. You're designing for the whole system in that also you want your product, your packaging at end of life to have additional value and be circulated once again. But if you're a brand owner, you don't have insight into a collector, into a recycler, into a converter, a packaging manufacturer, or a product manufacturer. You can't. You can't think that you do. And often we find these fantastic insights shared across different segments of the value chain. And we'll have one brand owner who's really excited about a new packaging that they've designed. And the recycler in the room says, dude, that will never enter our recycling plant, because of these different aspects, because they don't understand the system. And I think just a really interesting one for me, we have a phase 1 list of problematic and unnecessary packaging and products to design out. And the barrier bags, those thin bags of fruits and veg that we use to weigh our individual vegetables, it's a single polymer. That stream, the LDPE stream in South Africa, is actually already at a greater than 30% output recycling rate. So 30% of the LDPE packaging placed on the market in South Africa is already sold into other products. So we've already got that happening. So surely that barrier bag should be a really good product to enter our recycling stream. It never reaches our recyclers.
Do we know why?
It's very thin and very light, so it doesn't have any value to pick up. If you have a solid, thicker plastic, you get more weight from it. So a collector, it's got much more value end of life. And also not only that, those little barrier bags, so often they can fly away. So out of the back of trucks, etc., it's very easy for that material. The same as polystyrene. Very light, mostly air in terms of polystyrene. It easily is littered. But then also for the system which takes the plastic material into a recycling plant, the barrier bags often get wrapped around different elements of the plant and often doesn't even reach the recycling plant, but if it does, it doesn't end up in the recycling process itself. And that has turned out to be one of our biggest challenges to phase out. I mean, all our members just about voted on that one. Yeah, let's put this on the list. We'll definitely phase it out. It's turned out to be one of the more problematic. And we have some fantastic commitments our members have already made. And there's reuse pilots in process in the thinking and design process now. But it's been tough. So we really need to look at collaboration across the different sectors. And literally some of our packaging and some of our products are designed for landfill because we're not considering the system as a whole. They're designed for litter. They're designed to be pollutants. And that's something that we need to change. And we need that cross-sectoral collaboration even before we reach the consumer. The consumer's got a role to play. There's definitely a big role to play, but there's so much more upstream of the consumer.
Can I chip in one just thought there? Very quick, very
Okay,
quick.
cool.
The other such a good value of collaboration, and I think it hasn't been mentioned so much, is that we've been talking about the separate waste streams. But if you don't have people with demand for that recycled content, there's no point in collecting it. And I think that where collaboration across the value chain and is so valuable in the plastics back, because ultimately, if you're going to create if you're going to have a circular economy, somebody has to be using that waste material into their products. So if you're sitting there making virgin plastic packaging and you say, yes, we have a recyclable product, but we're just getting more virgin plastic and just pushing out, the recyclate that somebody else is going to use, it's never going to work. So you really, as the converter already, the manufacturer, the brand owner, you need to be saying, we need 100% recycled packaging. And I think that's been brilliant in our market, and I think, we've seen a lot of, like Unilever, not to drop names, but the sort of shampoo bottles, the detergent bottles going to 100% recycled content. And because of that, there's a lack of recyclate on the market. I think those white plastic bottles are being recycled at 80%, the HDPE bottles. It's huge, it's amazing. Only because there's that pull, there's that demand for that recycled material. And I think that's also where collaboration is so important.
All right, that's an important point. Bat, I'm going to come to you in a moment, and to you, Salim, and everyone else on the panel. I need you to think of what is the one thing we need to be doing right now to start fixing the problem. And hopefully it needs to be something that's measurable, that a year from now we can say, well, after implementing A, we have achieved X. And I know it's an impossible ask, but remember, both Eric and Helene reminded us that we need practical things to take away from these 2 days of the Design Festival, number one. Number two, we need to reflect on what can I do in my context, whether it's my homestead, it's my organization that I either own, manage, or I'm an employee at. How can I influence my broader social network of people into also adopting, even if it's a small aspect of the circular economy. But before I come to you with those, what is the one thing that we need to fix that is measurable, that will help us get there? It's your turn now to ask some questions. You've listened to an incredible 90 minutes of conversation. And if you can move the microphone around, please. If you can introduce yourself, where you're from, organization if you are, and obviously who you're directing the question to, please. The microphone is on its way.
Hi, it's Caroline Ungersbach. I'm from Sustainable Tourism Partnership Program. All these discussions are amazing, but I want to tell you, they work only in big cities. I've moved from Johannesburg to a little town in the Northern Cape, in fact in the Ubuntu municipality. And nobody understands what waste is all about. Nobody understands about waste separation. They don't have a waste plan. And I just see the kids, they go and buy their little schnuppies, and then they just drop the packets. And I go and say, pick it up. Why? You know, because they don't even have black bins or, so it starts with that plan. And I think it's really, really about education. So the kids need to know that that packet that they bought their chips in, or their sweet packet, needs to be thrown into a bin. So as an organisation, we have provided the town with 20 bins. Okay, we got companies to buy. As the Tourism Association, we got the businesses to buy bins and to put them outside their businesses, and then we had a mascot made, and that mascot now goes to the kids' schools and we give the kids black bags and we get them to start understanding what waste is all about. So really what I'm trying to say is, and I've been saying this for years, so a shared economy and a circular economy I think is really quite elitist, and I think that we've got to really break it down to a point where the general population and the kids actually start understanding what a circular economy is, what a shared economy is, and how they can actually start benefiting. So I'm very open to having a pilot project in my hometown that we can start measuring and seeing even how many bottles and how much packaging comes into the town on a weekly basis to the bottle stores, to the grocery stores, to the Pakistani stores, whatever. It would be nice to be able to measure that and then understand what we can do. Because nobody wants to come and collect the waste. They say it's too expensive. You can separate it, but nobody wants to collect the waste. So I guess my question is, how do we sort the problem out in a smaller rural town?
All right.
Considering that the distances are what they are.
Okay, well, Salim, I'll throw that to you, and I fully appreciate that she's in the Northern Cape and you are in the Western Cape. So perhaps examples of how we've done it in a Western Cape scenario. And I suppose my initial response is, we can do all of it. We can educate small towns how to get onto this wonderful train that we're on, while those who are in the urban settings, who are perhaps further advanced on the journey, can be encouraged to go even further. You're right, we're not always going to be at the same stage, but whatever stage we're at, let's do the small bit that we can do to move us forward. Salim?
Thanks, Afrika. And thanks for that question, Caroline. I think it's really hits the spot in terms of that it seems like these things are only happening in the big cities, and that's where everyone focuses on. And one of the key things that have actually been brought to my attention that needs to be implemented was also this deposit return scheme, which is to try and see how one can actually try and return as much of the packaging and get something out of it. And lo and behold, when it first came to me, it's, can we apply that in the city of Cape Town? And my first answer is no. Because everybody wants to do everything in the city because you know the waste volumes are there and you know the kickback will be quick. Can we not look at our outlying areas? And one in particular that I was looking at is Beaufort West, because there's a lot of waste issues and problems there because of its remoteness, because of the political instability. And we're talking about general services that's not in place. And the reason why it's not there is people don't understand the value of waste. And this particular deposit return scheme would be great to let people just get the idea that what I generally throw could actually give me value back. And I turned it around to those who brought it to me to say, if you put the system up, I'll give you two options, one in the city and one in Beaufort West. Will you grab it? And they said yes. So I said, wonderful. Now, will you be able to go to the town and collect the material? Because the thing that kills recycling and recovery is transport. And the more remote you are, remote from what? Remote from the recycling facilities. So you don't also want to push your carbon footprint up. And in the end, the recycling, and there's a lot of social media stories about recycling is a farce and that sort of thing, purely based on this sort of issue that's coming to the fore. So it's to try and break that, and if their model can break it, to say that it is actually worth our while. We're not going to push up the carbon footprint to go and collect and drive that process. Then these are the sort of things that's needed, and we are keeping a close eye out on the sort of smaller and rural municipalities, because that is where a lot of the systems are lacking at the moment. It may not be high volume, but it's impacting on people.
Yeah.
And from our point of view, we were told, be citizen-centric. And that is really what you need to drive for. So that's just one example of it. I think we have also been very fortunate that we have received 5 million rand from Provincial Treasury in this financial year to actually assist municipalities that struggle to reach compliance sort of levels. And one of the key things we actually want to also bring on board is, and we're going to use it for a demonstration model, is what's known as a micro-recycling facility, which is also known as a pod, which collects all sort of littered plastics, etc., which would actually then be processed within this plant. The person putting it together is actually the uptaker as well, so the demand is there for the supply that will be generated, and they normally pay them a premium price for it as well, which will also create a bit of social entrepreneurship, and again create that awareness that needs to come through. So we're looking at these sort of mechanisms, but it is a problem because of just the logistics around it.
The good news is that your Premier Saul and Premier Windy are very good chummies, so they can have a beer together and then have these conversations happening. Where's my microphone? Oh, there you go. Mapaseka had a question, please.
Thanks, Afrika. It's not really a question, but more a comment. We've been talking about behavior change and what needs to be done. But I remember, actually, what I want to say is I think that our education and curriculum has a significant role to play in behavior change, like Peter said earlier. I remember when I was a child, there was this campaign taught in primary school, don't be a litter bug, don't be a litter bug. And literally, I would shame an adult. on the ground.
Good for you.
As a young person, we have that audacity to tell an older person, like, listen, what you're doing is wrong. So I think we shouldn't underplay or not see the value that also young people have in that situation. Like you say, like in the schools, they can be very, very powerful agents of change and of behavior change. And I think that's something that we can definitely go back and explore. Just tell people, don't be a little bug, and the children will spread it like wildfire on TikTok hours.
I like that. I like that very much. Yes. You've got the microphone, so go ahead. Yeah. Sorry, that was just a comment she was sharing. It didn't require a response from anyone on the panel.
I'm just curious as to how does countries like the Netherlands or Western Europe, who definitely create more waste than developing countries like South Africa, are implementing I don't see how Western Europe or America or whatever is leading the way in like sustainability, because people are consuming non-stop.
Yeah.
So how is it that they are, like examples or role models?
But I'm going to hand that over to you. You are in the global north. How are you being exemplary in this space?
Yeah, sorry. The questions from the audience, I don't hear the first half, I think. Can you briefly...
Short synopsis, which is a redundancy of words because synopsis is short anyway. We talk about the global south and developing nations like South Africa needing to do a lot of work in this space. And yet, we find that the global north and the west are actually the major consumers of product and therefore contribute the most likely to wastage. What are you doing to address the issue? What is being done to change consumer behavior, for example, and to be dealing with the issues of wastage?
You mean in my case in the Netherlands?
In the Netherlands, give us an example. Yeah, what are you guys doing there? How are you dealing with it?
Well, of course. First of all, I completely agree with this comment, and of course we have our strategies to, as I pointed out, we want to be half circular in 2030 and fully circular in 2050, and I hope that will contribute to reducing our role of like global polluters, because basically that's what we are. And another thing, of course, is that I do think that we have a responsibility that goes also beyond our borders. And of course, one thing is take for instance the issue of landfills. Landfills globally are major emitters of methane, which is a huge cause for the global warming. Now there, of course, we have even an interest ourselves in working globally to curb that problem. And another thing is, which I am not at all proud of, is that part of the waste that we generate ends up, for instance, in Western Africa, and I've seen it myself, and also, for instance, in Indonesia, and again, I've seen it myself, that part of our, for instance, plastics end up there. So on the one hand, I think we should ban those exports. That's one thing. Another thing is that I think, of course, we have these systems of extended producer responsibility in place, and I think part of the proceeds of those systems should be spent in, for instance, Western Africa to help improve the processing capacity in Western Africa. So in that sense, I think that yes, from our own perspective, because of our high consumption, we have a responsibility that transcends our borders. And on the other hand, in a very practical terms, yes, part of our waste leaves our country, and that increases only the responsibility. So it is quite something that we have to work on.
Helen actually made reference to it. One of our guests tomorrow, tomorrow's focus is on textiles and tourism, but she also works in the waste space. And in a conversation we had 2 months ago, that is the one issue that came up, that quite a bit of wastage from Europe ends up, as you say, West Africa, sometimes even Central and Eastern Africa. Yeah. And the reason why it's not in South Africa is because we've banned it. We don't allow such wastage to be brought to this country. So there's a conversation certainly to be had there. The easy answer is they are contributing to waste. They are, perhaps we as Africa have to challenge them and go, wait a minute, we can't be the dumping ground for your waste. You need to come up with better solutions for some of the challenges. And we see it every COP meeting, right, where the countries that are most affected by climate change, a lot of them are on the African continent, and yet we are not contributing as much or effectively. Look, South Africa is contributing, but the rest of Africa is not necessarily towards the challenge of climate change, and yet they are worst affected. But that's a conversation over lunch. But while I have you, I'll then give you maybe 60 seconds for what you think could be the one thing, if we implement it tomorrow, will go a long way into one, realizing the benefit of the circular economy, 2, impacting positively on the environment, and 3, having the impact on society that we've also been discussing for the last 2 hours.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll give it a try. And frankly, I will put forward a not so popular suggestion, because, well, there was at some point the issue about leapfrogging. So the circular economy would allow Africa to leapfrog basically good waste management. That I don't believe in. You need a good waste management system. And you need to pay for a good waste management system. And one thing we did in the Netherlands was we have a very dedicated waste tax in our municipalities. The rule is whatever you spend on waste management has to be collected from the citizen, and that is one of the few taxes that is where what you earn from the tax is directly related to what you spend on good waste management. Now, we have calculated how much that would mean, and it's less than 1% of families' income. With that, you have a good basic system for waste management. So if I can make one recommendation, implement that system, and you have a very solid basis for good waste management, and from there to proceed into circular economy.
All right, thank you very much, Bert. And of course, thank you once again for those dates for the business mission that will be coming to South Africa. We'll circulate that with the delegates. Salim, your 60 seconds start now.
I hope none of them have got rotten tomatoes, because I'm going to get it. But maybe just to flight those slides that I've provided, just to quickly get a reality check of where we are. There we go, that's the first one. So that is the current situation in the Western Cape at the moment, where red indicates 0 landfill airspace within now to 5 years from now. Green is we've got enough beyond 15 years, and the yellow is actually where we are between 5 and 15. We've got a serious crisis. And I know that landfills is not what the circular economy promotes or put in place, but if we just go to the next slide, that safety net at the bottom is what the landfill is. The show is about crossing from point A to point B. That's the circular economy. This is the way waste should be handled. But we've got to ensure that we put in the basic infrastructure in place, because our materials currently is not all circular, and it's going to take at least 20 to 30 years before we can actually transcend, if not longer, to get it to purely circular. So we can't exclude it, and there are some municipalities or governments that feel, do away with landfills. Yes, we're not putting the organics in anymore, so we're going to mitigate the methane and the sort of greenhouse gas emissions that come from it. But at this point in time, our backlogs, as I've mentioned before, is so big, we need to start pushing that safety nets in, so our focus can now be entirely on top to make sure the person walks from point A to point B. We want to see the show we don't fall. But at this point in time, we need to have the net in place.
So what is that tightrope? What is that one practical thing that if we start implementing today?
That is really just, and this is where EPRF started. Remember, it is only we're only transitioning towards it. We've got 6 products on the market now that's following the sort of extended producer responsibility, which is one end. There's a lot, it's actually multi-components that goes with it, because the other end is also, as was mentioned as well, how do we speak to the people in what they would understand? How do we design things for them? And this whole area around co-design is also something that we've picked up lately upon, in terms of particularly around sensitive topics. You mentioned the sanitary towels. We spoke about nappies, etc. It's not things the community would want to speak about. So within these co-design workshops, we've actually found that these are sort of taboo things to talk about. But if we don't get it from yourself to be able to understand what's the gist on the ground, we're never going to solve it. We're going to come there and try and put a solution in place, which always fails.
Yeah.
So we need to turn a lot of that around. So all of that is really embodied within that pathway, which we need to walk
All
and
right.
balance it out as well.
Thank you. Kirsten?
Okay, I need at least as much time as Celine. I think we just need to also be focusing on where we are as a country in our socio-economic context. So a tax on a large number of our citizens, taxing waste, is an issue of social justice, actually, for the large number of people living in our country. And if you look at the extended producer responsibility is one tool in a circular economy toolbox. And if you look at the context of Europe, the landfill fees in Europe are orders of magnitude higher than what we have in South Africa. Now, the city of Cape Town has the highest landfill fees in the country, and that is only just reaching cost recovery. So best practice in other areas is that your landfill fees are cost recovery for the system as a whole up until the end of rehabilitation, which has been the aim of Cape Town. But it's also putting the next landfill in place. And there's an element of taxation where you disincentivize people to throw away. If you look at where we are, like a waste watershed type idea in South Africa, the easiest route is a dump down the road or throw into the river outside your house because there is no system that you have available. And the cheapest route, even if you do get it to a sanitary engineered landfill, the cheapest route is to throw it away. So we don't have that system that is more enabling of a secondary resource economy in South Africa. And it's the same for many other developing countries. So we need to work within our own context and to realize that some of the tools that are used elsewhere are not necessarily, should be applied in our context. And I think if we try and get a bit more practical, I think one is rethink our consumption in the way, so what are we buying and how can we institute reuse? And I'm talking to myself who forgot my reusable coffee cup this morning. So something along those lines. And then, so the separating material for recycling and making it available and ideally paying for a service. I think all of us in the room can afford to pay for a service or at least drive our own material to a drop-off point. So I want to point people to the Sustainable Seas Trust website. As far as I know, that is the best, most well-maintained website in the country, and I see Kat agrees with me, in terms of where you can take your material for recycling, so to a buyback center, to a drop-off, and then ask more questions. So we're seeing a very worrying development at the moment with extended producer responsibility, is that we have some organizations, and again, I'm going to go back to the plastics because it's my whole life at the moment, I think, in terms of the Plastics Pact. But we see some organizations with the material identification codes. So for plastics, that's numbers 1 to 7. They're putting them in chasing arrows, which indicates a recyclability. So I'll give you some examples. PET is number 1, HD is number 2. Those should be in solid triangles. Not all PET is currently collected for recycling in South Africa. If you're a PET beverage bottle, 350 mils and greater, you've got a good chance of being collected in the bigger centers, referencing what we've spoken of before. But we see organizations putting communication out to consumers that all plastics 1 to 7 are recyclable. And what they're meaning is technically recyclable. And if you have any product, no matter what sort of, and I've heard the phrase monstrous hybrid, and I use it as often as I can because I love it, the mix of very different material types to produce a product, if you throw enough money at that product, yes, you can recover some value, you can make something else out of it, but at what cost? And can we actually absorb that cost as a country? And no, we can't. So we need to look at technically and economically feasibly recyclable. And we've chosen a threshold in line with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Plastics Pacts globally, the Plastics Pact Network, as a 30% output recycling rate. So at least, and our recyclers remind us, 30% is not a good recycling rate. but it's a threshold at which you should be able to call a material recyclable. So ask questions, challenge. As SA Plastics Pact, in terms of the plastics, we can link you to some really good information. We can link you to organizations and other materials that can give you good information. We see some packaging with 100% recyclable on it. That particular packaging, which I have in mind, which I won't mention, is recycled probably at a less than 10% and input rate.
How do they get away with that? I mean, if you're going to make a claim that the entire product is recycled, and yet a fraction of that is surely, I want to shame them. Can we have an interview on this tomorrow morning? And then we can call them out and they must fix this.
I agree, we do need to be that, and that's something as consumers that we can call people out on.
Yeah.
So as Plastics Pact, we come alongside and we welcome any company where they are on their journey. Come work with us, we'll share our learnings, and together we can go much further. So that is the aim. But we need to be challenging these claims. So tell me, what do you mean by 100% recyclable? And actually get and ask for the data and the information to back that up.
All right. Kirsten, the websites and the URLs that you reference we'll share with the delegates, obviously. Thank you very much for that. Katerina?
It's difficult to sort all my thoughts. Okay, there's a lot happening. So I think in the South African context, we have talked a lot about a just transition, mainly driven in the energy sector. That conversation needs to go further. It's not just the energy sector, it's every sector. And that's, I think, where the circular economy is coming in. That's almost like the umbrella term. You can call it green economy, blue economy, I don't care. It's about being resilient and being regenerative, right? And that's what we need to get excited about. That means we need to stream policies, our master plans. We need to almost infiltrate national government to be like, yes, let's do that. And that's not only linked to climate change, because just transition, again, is linked to climate change adaptation and mitigation. But it's more. We also are battling with biodiversity loss, with droughts, with fires, and so forth. And obviously, that's all linked to climate change. So I think that's a narrative we need to better unpack and be like, okay, the circular economy is a vehicle for all the sectors that we actually want to just collaborate, partner up, and look at all the different steps that we are taking along the value chains. And then I really hope...
By the way, is it possible to do that before 2024? It's an election year next year.
2024, I don't know. Do you have time?
And I bring it up because all politicians will be coming to each and every one of us asking for us to vote for them. And unless we as the electorate, as we're asking consumers, actually ask the hard questions, we will not get politicians moving on this thing.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree on that. So the Presidential Climate Commission is obviously grasping with climate change, but they haven't seized the opportunity of the circular economy, so we've started engaging with them. But again, we need also national governments and departments on board, that they actually seize the opportunities. And we have the DSI is very much looking in the science, innovation, and technology side of things around the circular economy, but it needs to go beyond the DSI, right? We need to get the DTIC on board, we need to get National Treasury on board. It needs to be the Department of Water and Sanitation, and so forth. And that needs to trickle down to provincial level and to municipalities, and it needs to be implementable. So I really hope that at some stage we get to that point where we actually have a circular economy roadmap, right, that links to like the National Development Plan. That's what I really hope, a roadmap which is very like action-driven, very strategic, and which people can understand. And it is difficult. This is not an easy thing.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Katerina. Kirsten, you have the second last word.
Oh, Pippa.
Pippa.
Oh, sorry, Pippa.
Say, didn't Katerina get a chance?
I don't mind.
She gets 2 chances. Which would be great, because I agree with Katerina. They're like, oh my God, there's so many things, where do I start? So, I mean, I think I totally don't want to actually just say what consumers should do, but I think, you know, we've covered what government should do, and I totally don't want to put everything on consumers, we know what businesses should do, and I think Kirsten's gone there. So I'm going to take the consumer view, so just saying, more from a personal side, maybe, but with the proviso that or the caveat that I don't want to put everything on the consumer. But I do think there are so many amazing circular products out there already, actually. And as Kirsten said, she forgot her reusable cup. But why isn't there a service here where we could have had reusable cups that would get taken away by a company and washed? Why is it always our idea to have to bring the cup, you know? So there is a cup club. There are
businesses, circular solutions, trying to get off the ground. And as consumers, what we really need to do is support them. I think the best thing I ever bought was my silicone baking mat. Oh my God, that is such a brilliant product. Who doesn't have one, you know? Who uses that baking paper anymore? So we need to discover these products, you know, reusable wraps for school lunches. I don't know, but they're all these little niche products available in craft markets and on webs, you know, online, but they're not in Discam, they're not in Clicks. So that we need to try and get these great circular solutions out of niche into mainstream. So we change our mindsets. We buy them, tell our friends, put them on our socials, try and get them out there to help the businesses that get off the ground and into mainstream. And ask Clicks, so where are your moon cups? Where's your reusable nappies? Why are there only disposable options here? And I think there we can, as consumers, hopefully change this mindset that we just need to use single-use products.
The next daddy friend of mine who invites me to a
Bring him
nappy
a pack of
party,
reusables.
I'm gonna, literally, I don't think we'll know what to do with it, but I'm going, yeah, you can sort it out. Thank you very much. A round of applause, please, for our panel today. Hopefully, you found something in there to be inspired by, and if nothing else, trigger the right questions that you need to be asking yourself so that you can go with us on this journey to realizing a solution. Tomorrow, as indicated, the focus is going to be on textiles and tourism and how they can contribute positively to the circular economy. I did say to Pippa that she was the second last word because the final word actually goes to Sonia Niederhammer of Graphic Harvest. She has had the impossible task of listening to the last 120 minutes of conversation and using color, spray paint, and beautiful writing capture all of that in one go. If we can get a microphone to her, please, Sonia, so that you can just reflect on us what it is that you've captured so far and what has pricked your interest. Good afternoon already.
Thanks, Afrika. I wasn't expecting to have a chance to speak.
Oh, you poor thing.
No, I'm good. So I mean, it's really a collage of thoughts we've got here. There's so much going on. But I'll chat you through some kind of big pieces. But really, circular economy is about meeting the needs of society and being the least environmentally damaging. So we've got that kind of balance between people and environment. And then it's very much about it needs to be practical, but it also needs to be beneficial and enhance well-being. These are solutions that need to work and work on the ground. And then just, I guess, big things. So really working at design stage and having these multiple life cycles, sort of keeping the highest value of something, not just recycling. And it's really about changing mindsets and behavior change, seeing things in a different way. How do we value reclaimers in our informal sectors? How do we amplify education? And also really, a lot of these circular solutions are the cheaper solutions, so they're the obvious ones to be going for. And right at the top here, I've just got a list of these things that we really need to start now. So managing our landfills better, rethinking consumption, asking questions, supporting existing solutions. So yeah, I just captured kind of the nuggets. If you feel like there's something seriously missing, come and visit me.
I am very impressed, by the way, because Sonia obviously had a sense of who we were speaking to and what it is that we were talking about, but had no idea what the panelists were going to be answering and contributing. And to have been able to capture all of that and do it so creatively, absolutely amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing what you're going to be doing tomorrow. A round of applause, please, for Sonia. And of course, if you are here, you are most welcome to take videos and pictures of that and see how it then develops tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us this morning and early part of the afternoon. Tomorrow we gather again at 10 o'clock right here at D-School Africa at the University of Cape Town to continue our conversation on the circular economy, focusing on textiles or fashion and of course tourism, which is an important sector not only to this region of South Africa, but also to the African continent. Have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you very much for your time this Monday. And we're out. Thank you very much, everyone.